Hey everyone, just a quick reminder. Only about 25% of you watching are subscribed to the channel. If you're enjoying the content, hitting that subscribe button would really help the channel grow. And while you're at it, smash that like button too. It helps a ton, and lets me know you're enjoying the content. Thanks for being here, and let's dive into the story. My name's Terry, and a few months ago I was just a guy trying to keep my handyman business afloat. It wasn't exactly thriving, thanks to unreliable employees who'd rather clock out early than put in an honest day's work. With bills piling up and my savings drying up faster than a puddle in July, I knew I needed something different. That's how I ended up at Tractor Supply one Saturday morning, picking up feed for my goats and chickens. The smell of hay and oil reminded me of simpler times, and as I wandered toward the back to grab a bag of cracked corn, something caught my eye. It was a yellowed flyer tacked onto the community board near the restrooms. Help wanted, experienced excavator operator, night shift, great pay. The words practically leapt off the page. I owned an excavator and had years of experience operating one. My gut told me this might be my shot at getting back on track. Without thinking twice, I snapped a picture of the flyer and headed to the front to pay for my feed. Later that day, I found myself walking into a modest construction office on the outskirts of town. The place smelled like sawdust and fresh coffee, and a friendly woman at the front desk directed me to HR. I sat down with a guy named Steve, who seemed nice enough but had that corporate air about him. As we went through the usual interview questions, a voice boomed from the hallway. "Who's this?" In walked Mark, the owner of the construction company. He looked to be in his mid-40s with a sturdy build and the kind of confident swagger that made you want to shake his hand. As Steve explained who I was, Mark's eyes lit up. "Terry, come with me," he said, motioning toward his office. Mark and I hit it off immediately. We were two like-minded guys who appreciated hard work and straight talk. Over the course of an hour, we swapped stories about life, family, and the headaches of running a business. By the end of it, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. $50 an hour as the night shift lead. Starting Monday. "Welcome aboard, Terry," he said with a grin. To celebrate, Mark even took me out for beers that evening. We laughed like old friends, talking about everything from our favorite fishing spots to the frustrations of finding good employees. He explained why the night shift was so critical. The company was under pressure to finish a project ahead of schedule for some hotshot engineer. I'd only have to work nights for a week before transitioning to the first shift lead role. I went home that night feeling optimistic for the first time in months. Things were finally looking up. Monday night rolled around and I found myself at the job site, a sprawling patch of dirt surrounded by towering floodlights that lit up the night like a football stadium. My crew of 4 was already there, huddled near a trailer, sipping coffee and cracking jokes. Jose, the loudest of the bunch, greeted me with a grin. "You ready to dig some holes, boss?" he joked, slapping me on the back. I climbed into my excavator, the hum of its engine familiar and comforting. My task was straightforward: dig trenches for the sewage and water lines while the crew prepped the pipes. We worked steadily, the sounds of machinery filling the air, and for a while, it felt like just another job. Around midnight, things took a turn. My excavator hit something solid, a deep metallic thunk that rattled the whole rig. I killed the engine and leaned out of the cab. "Jose!" I shouted. "Something's down there." Jose jogged over, flashlight in hand. He peered into the trench, his face lighting up with a mix of surprise and excitement. "Yo, Terry, I think you hit a treasure chest or something." The rest of the crew gathered around as Jose jumped into the trench, the beam of his flashlight dancing over the dirt-caked object. It was a chest, all right, an old, rusted thing with heavy iron hinges, the kind of chest you'd see in pirate movies, full of gold doubloons and jewels. At least, that's what we all hoped. Jose called for a hammer, and one of the guys handed it down. He swung at the rusted lock, and with a metallic snap, it broke apart. We held our breath as he lifted the lid, only to let out a collective groan of disappointment. "No gold," Jose muttered, holding up a single weathered piece of paper. It looked ancient, the edges brittle and yellowed with age. He unfolded it carefully, squinting at the faded writing. What's it say? I asked. Jose cleared his throat, dramatically, like he was about to read a Shakespearean monologue. Rule number 1. If you found this, it's too late. The guys chuckled nervously, but I felt a strange chill run down my spine. Jose continued, his tone shifting from playful to uneasy. Rule number 2. By opening this chest, you've released dark spirits. That got a few laughs, but they were forced now. Even Jose seemed unsettled as he read the final rule. Rule number 3. Do not rebury the chest until the spirits return to it. Silence hung in the air as we stared at the chest, then at each other. Finally, one of the guys broke the tension with a nervous laugh. Whoever wrote that had way too much free time. Yeah, Jose agreed, stuffing the paper back into the chest. No treasure here. Let's get back to work. But as the night went on, things got weird. The floodlights flickered, plunging the site into darkness for a few seconds at a time. The excavator's engine sputtered and stalled without explanation. At one point, a pipe fell off the truck without anyone touching it, nearly crushing one of the crew. Man, this place feels cursed, Jose muttered, shaking his head. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, but even I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd disturbed something we shouldn't have. When the shift finally ended, I headed home, exhausted and uneasy. I told myself it was just a rough night, that things would smooth out by tomorrow. But deep down, I knew better. We'd opened Pandora's box, or in this case, a rusted chest, and there was no closing it now. Tuesday night started like any other shift, but the air around the job site felt heavier. Maybe it was the strange events from the night before, or maybe it was just my imagination running wild. Either way, I couldn't shake the uneasiness gnawing at the back of my mind. The crew seemed quieter than usual, too. Jose, normally the loudest and most upbeat, barely cracked a joke as we geared up for the night. When I asked him what was wrong, he just shrugged. Didn't sleep well, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. We got to work, but it didn't take long for things to spiral. About an hour into the shift, one of the floodlights on the far side of the site flickered and died, plunging the area into shadows. Before we could react, another light went out, and then another, until only the pale glow of the moon lit the site. What the hell is going on? One of the guys muttered, looking around nervously. Probably just a power issue, I said, though I didn't believe it. Keep working, I'll check the generator. I made my way to the trailer, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the darkness. As I approached the generator, I could hear it humming steadily. No problem there. But just as I turned to head back, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow, tall and thin, flitted between the equipment. Who's there? I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. No answer. I shone my flashlight in the direction of the movement, but there was nothing there. Just the silent, empty site. Shaking my head, I chalked it up to paranoia and headed back to the crew. When I returned, I found them clustered near the trench we'd been working on. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with fear. "Boss," Jose said, his voice trembling. "You need to see this." I followed his gaze to the trench, where the chest we'd uncovered the night before sat upright, its lid open. The paper with the rules was gone, replaced by a new sheet. This one was clean and white, the ink fresh. "What the?" I muttered, leaning in to read it. Rule 4. Do not attempt to destroy the chest. Rule 5. Do not leave the site until the spirits are contained. "What the hell is this?" one of the guys asked, his voice shaking. "Who's messing with us?" Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed across the site. We spun around to see a stack of pipes toppling over, narrowly missing one of the workers. Another crash followed, and then another, as if unseen hands were wreaking havoc. "We need to get out of here," one of the guys said, panic rising in his voice. "No!" I shouted louder than I intended. "We can't just leave. You saw the rules. If we leave now, who knows what'll happen?" As if on cue, the shadows around us began to shift and swirl, coalescing into vague humanoid shapes. Their forms were blacker than the night, their glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. One by one, they stepped closer, silent and menacing. "Oh, fuck," Jose whispered, his voice barely audible. "What are those things?" "I don't know," I said, my mind racing. "But we're not sticking around to find out. Grab the chest. We're taking it to the trailer." Reluctantly, Jose picked up the chest, and we made our way to the trailer, the shadowy figures following us at a distance. Once inside, we barricaded the door and placed the chest on the table. "What now?" one of the guys asked, his voice trembling. "We figure out how to put them back," I said, though I had no idea how to do that. The rules didn't exactly come with a user manual. As we sat there trying to come up with a plan, my phone buzzed. It was a text from one of the first shift workers. "Hey Terry, what's this note on the board about rules? Something about spirits?" My blood ran cold. Whatever we'd unleashed wasn't confined to the night shift. It was spreading, and unless we figured out how to stop it, there'd be no end to the chaos. We stared at the chest like it might explode. Jose paced the tiny trailer, muttering to himself while the others huddled by the door, their eyes darting between the window and the barricade. Outside, the shadowy figures drifted closer, their glowing eyes cutting through the dark like hot coals. "This is insane," one of the guys whispered. "We're gonna die out here." "No one's dying," I snapped, trying to keep my voice steady. "We just need to figure out how to trap them again." "And how do you suggest we do that, boss?" Jose asked, his voice laced with panic. "Wave a magic wand? Call Ghostbusters?" I didn't have an answer. My mind raced, trying to piece together a solution. The rules on the new paper gave no hints, no instructions, just cold warnings. But the fact that the chest had been tampered with, changed, meant something. It wasn't just a box. It was part of whatever we'd unleashed. "Look," I said, trying to sound confident. "The rules said not to rebury the chest until the spirits returned to it. Maybe we need to find a way to lure them back inside." "And how do we do that?" Jose asked. "Put out a spirit-sized welcome mat?" "Maybe they're tied to the chest somehow," I said. "If we can figure out what they want." A loud bang interrupted me, followed by the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. One of the floodlights outside had been knocked over, its bulb exploding in a shower of sparks. The shadows grew bolder, their shapes more defined as they pressed closer to the trailer. "Okay, screw this," Jose said, grabbing his phone. "I'm calling for backup." "Who are you gonna call?" I asked. "The cops? What are you gonna tell them? That we're being haunted?" Jose scrolled through his contacts, ignoring me. "Nope. I'm calling those ghost hunting nerds from Facebook, the ones with the podcast. They'll eat this up." I opened my mouth to argue, but stopped. As ridiculous as it sounded, we were out of options. If those guys had even a shred of experience with this kind of thing, they might know more than we did. 30 minutes later, a beat-up van pulled into the site, its headlights cutting through the gloom. 4 people climbed out, armed with cameras, EMF detectors, and an assortment of gadgets that looked like they'd been cobbled together in a garage. Their leader, a lanky guy named Rick, introduced himself with a grin that was way too enthusiastic for the situation. "Y'all got spirits, huh?" he said, adjusting his backwards cap. "Don't worry, we're professionals." I almost laughed. Almost. Rick and his crew set up shop in the trailer, their gadgets beeping and whirring as they scanned the chest. Rick squinted at the new piece of paper inside, his grin fading. "Yeah, this is bad," he muttered, scratching his chin. "No kidding," Jose said, crossing his arms. "What do we do about it?" Rick looked at us, his face unusually serious. "We'll try to contain them, but I'm not gonna lie. It's risky. These spirits are pissed." "Pissed about what?" I asked. "Could be anything," Rick said. "Disturbing their rest, opening the chest, breathing too loud. Who knows? Spirits like this don't follow logic." The crew worked quickly, setting up strange devices around the chest. They explained the plan in vague terms, Something about drawing the spirits into the chest with energy fields and binding them using a modified EMF generator. It all sounded like sci-fi nonsense, but at this point I was willing to try anything. For a moment it seemed like it might actually work. The shadowy figures hesitated, their movements slowing as the devices emitted a low hum. But just as the spirit started to retreat, one of the gadgets sparked and died with a loud pop. That's not supposed to happen," Rick said, his face pale. The spirit surged forward, slamming into the trailer with enough force to rattle the walls. One of Rick's crew screamed as a shadowy hand reached through the window, grabbing at her arm. She wrenched free, stumbling back, but her face was etched with terror. "Abort! Abort!" Rick shouted, grabbing his equipment. "We're out of here!" "What? You can't leave!" I yelled, but it was no use. Rick and his team bolted for their van, leaving us behind. The shadows pressed closer, their forms swirling like smoke. The air inside the trailer grew cold, so cold I could see my breath. Desperation clawed at me as I turned to Jose and the others. "We have to do this ourselves," I said. "If they're tied to the chest, maybe we can bait them back in." "How?" Jose asked, his voice trembling. I grabbed the chest and opened it wide. "We make them come to us." The air inside the trailer felt like ice, and every breath was a struggle. The shadows crowded closer, their glowing eyes locked onto us. My heart pounded as I clutched the chest, its weight somehow heavier now, like it knew the burden it carried. "Come on!" I shouted, holding the chest open like it was a lifeline. "You want this thing? Then take it." The spirits hesitated for a moment, their forms shifting and swirling like black smoke caught in a breeze. It was as if they were deciding whether to obey or destroy us outright. My crew stood frozen behind me, their fear palpable. Then, one by one, the spirits moved. They flowed toward the chest, their movements deliberate and predatory. The closer they came, the colder it got, until frost began to form on the windows, and our breath fogged the air. "They're going in," Jose whispered, his voice trembling. But as the first spirit reached the chest, something went wrong. Instead of being drawn inside, it recoiled violently, screeching like metal on metal. The sound was deafening, forcing us to cover our ears. The other spirits followed suit, their shapes writhing in pain as they pulled back. "What the hell is happening?" Jose yelled. I glanced at the chest, and that's when I saw it. Inside, beneath the faint glow of the moonlight, a second piece of paper lay folded at the bottom. It hadn't been there before. My hands shook as I reached in and unfolded it. Rule 6. The spirits cannot be trapped until the one who opened the chest seals it. I looked at Jose, my stomach sinking. "It has to be you," I said, holding the chest out to him. "You're the one who broke the lock." Jose's face drained of color. "What? No. I can't. I don't know what to do." "You don't have to know," I said. "You just have to try. If we don't do this now, we're all dead." For a moment I thought he might refuse. His hands trembled, and his eyes darted between the chest and the spirits. But then he nodded, stepping forward with a resolve I didn't expect. "Fine," he said, his voice shaking. "Let's do this." He took the chest from me, his grip firm despite his fear. As he held it out, the spirits surged forward again, their movements more erratic, more desperate. It was like they could sense the end approaching. "Close it," I yelled. Jose waited until the last possible moment, then slammed the lid shut. The sound echoed through the trailer like a gunshot. For a second, everything went still. The air grew warmer, the frost melted from the windows, and the oppressive weight lifted from my chest. Then, with a deafening crack, the chest splintered apart. A burst of black smoke erupted from the shattered wood, swirling into the air before disappearing completely. The room fell silent. "It's over," one of the guys muttered, his voice barely audible. We stood there in stunned silence, staring at the remains of the chest. The paper inside had turned to ash, leaving no trace of the rules or the nightmare we'd just endured. By the time the sun rose, we'd cleaned up as much as we could. burying the pieces of the chest far away from the site. None of us spoke much, the weight of the night too fresh to process. When the first shift arrived, I told them we'd had equipment issues and sent them home. They didn't question it. That evening, Mark called me, asking why the job site had been shut down. I wanted to tell him everything, but how do you explain something like this without sounding insane? Instead, I told him we'd hit some unexpected complications and needed a day to regroup. He wasn't happy, but he didn't press the issue. After that, I resigned. The $50 an hour wasn't worth my sanity or my life. Mark was disappointed, but he understood, especially when I hinted that the job site might have weird vibes. He laughed it off, but I could tell it unsettled him. As for Jose and the crew, they left town not long after. We didn't stay in touch, but I hope they're doing okay. None of us ever talked about that night again. Every now and then, I drive past that site. The building's finished now, a sleek office complex with shiny glass windows. People work there every day, completely unaware of what we unearthed beneath the ground. I wonder if the spirits are truly gone, or if they're just waiting for someone else to make a mistake. All I know is, if I ever see another chest in the ground, I'm leaving it right where it is.